Saviva, to being a professor in Africa, and to being the John G. Williams in teaching in America. Now, in coming and going to America last year, I left in a flood, I arrived in an ice storm, I came back to a flood, and I went back to a tornado. Our climates are changing, and this isn't something we can tackle individually. So what I talk to America about and how we start to get the numbers to add up. You can learn from islands. We're a long way away. We get really good at using what we have, at reusing resources. So, in 2019, Andrew, Irving and I gave a talk at Taliesin West, Frank Lloyd Wright's desert encampment in Arizona. And halfway through, Aaron Betsky, the great American critic, stood up and asked a really tricky question. And we ended up doing this book with him, which is about peripheries. It's about from India. And the interesting thing, peripheries are important. You know, we're all far, far away from somewhere. And interestingly, oceanic people, Pacific, where I'm from, by the Great Southern Ocean. So, haere mai, we say. Come visit us. But you must wear a hat, because we live under diminished ozone. Every school kid in New Zealand must wear a hat when they go outside. Our landscapes are shifting. So we don't necessarily agree with Kenneth Frampton, who says, there's now so many landscapes, we should just make new ones. Or Ren Koolhaus, who says, let's select what we're going to preserve before we build. We're still trying to understand what we've got. Johanni Palasma talks about architecture being weak or strong, fast or slow, if you think, is a way. But that all assumes that landscapes shift at the same speed. So we like to describe the relationship between architecture and landscape for its ability to participate. So the pyramids change very slowly in a slowly changing desert landscape. It's a good fit, they're soft. But pick them up and put them in a braided river and the fit loosens, soft becomes hard. And this idea of, it's what we call soft architecture, means that as a practice we're looking to participate with, and they're important because New Zealand has 24% of its indigenous forest left, and yet we require 30% to maintain our indigenous ecosystems, and the missing 6% is made up in these failed farmlands. So there's an opportunity for architecture to be part of conservation, but we need an approach that doesn't look to control the landscape. Which is what we learned from this holiday house, or batch as we call it, that we built in a forest. Now we built it as we were taught, with sacrificial roofing to collect water and protect from branches, and low recessive interiors as an escape from the scale and verticality of the forest. And we set it so you move as you might in the forest, from one space to the next, one side to the other, meaning even the bathrooms are permeable. And the building has this close fit to its forested landscape. Now the trees keep growing, and the arborists use something bigger than a lawnmower to maintain control, because from life in the forest, the landscape had shifted. And without the moderation of the trees, the sun was hotter, the wind was stronger. Our building has lost its fit to the landscape. So in refinishing the building, we need to acknowledge that in time a new forest will grow. And it will be a stronger forest because it will be indigenous and it will grow in relation to the building. And in these shifting landscapes, it's not the landscape that needs to be iteratively refinished, it's the building. And of course our building hasn't been set to be iteratively refinished. So we add frames that the building can set back behind and use to enact change. Frames, eaves, and screens. But the model's different. And these new elements can be iteratively removed as the forest grows. Then we add a new building, a fifth, a shade building, to give back some of the dappled forest light that everyone was missing. But also to remove some of the hierarchy, the fronts and the backs, that the buildings had found without the forest in the clearing. So we've added frames, this new shade building, which allows us to draw the landscape between the buildings and prompt the buildings to change as the forest grows. So from life in the forest to life in a totally different environment. It's a big storm. We've got new elements seamlessly stitched to the existing. And the buildings have refound a fit to their forest, to the new cleared landscape. We've got our new shade building sitting out the front. And we've got hammocks hung on posts rather than trees. And the interiors are once again recessive, but this time from the clearing rather than the forest. But the building doesn't need the clearing. These new elements can be iteratively removed with a screwdriver as the forest grows. So from life in the forest to life in the clearing, and ultimately back to life in the forest. To like worrying about the informality of New Zealanders. Now, that ends then as you then present for World Building of the Year. The stakes go up, big auditorium. I'd done the same talk, and I'd no sooner finished than the German judge picked up his microphone and said, "In Germany we have a rule. We don't build within 28 metres of a forest." And slammed the microphone down. Whew. What do you say? Well, I said, yes, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't, which was brilliant, but a complete disaster. But our German friend was thinking as he'd been taught. In my doctorate, I went on to kind of explore this idea that what's amazing about a forest is that you don't know where each tree is going to grow, but you know what to expect. You know their size, you know how many there be, you know the light conditions. So therefore you can design both reactively and preemptively. Which, conceptually, if you participate with the landscape, might mean that you could participate all the way back to near original landscape, something near impossible. So, conceptually, batch with 2 roofs becomes batch without roofs. That's a 6-sided roof rack kind of wandering off on its adventure to near original. Batch with 2 roofs, batch without roofs. And I said to my children, I finished my doctorate. They sent me back to the corner at that point. That's pretty much what it was. Now, this was the point that Aaron and Betsy in America stood up and said, are you trying to do what Vincent Scully documented in The Woods of Newport when he described the American vernacular? No, I said. If you believe that landscape has time as a parameter, as we do, then we're not looking for a vernacular. We're looking for a process. We don't believe that you can control the landscape. This building floods every year now. We're looking to try and use experience in forests to kind of guide us into our other work. So, in one of New Zealand's most protected buildings, we can turn from this to this through seismic anxiety. We can connect it back to its community by showing what's important in the fit to its landscape. And what's important is what's in here, this space. Or in altering a provincial sports stadium, you acknowledge that buildings like these have many uses. So we give it a space that has absolutely no function, but every function. It's simply provide a space that looks out to the city and can be used in different ways and invites different ways of contributing. And ironically, it's the most Miesian looking building we'll ever do, but it's just a big veranda. And this idea of doing less is important because a lot of people are trying to cope with sustainability by doing more. This house, the Feather House, is about less. It's about setting an invitation rather than a prescription. Right, welcome back to Aotearoa, New Zealand. So way down here, sustainability isn't about product. That's just something else to come on a boat. Sustainability is about doing more with less. So we're here with a temperate climate, a bit like California. You really can be here in the morning and here in the afternoon. This is where I live. It's pretty cool. Here's community, and here's our site. Somewhere between town and country, land and air. We've got neighbours to the front and wilderness to the back. Now our clients are a family of makers who bought a kitchen and then stored and restored materials and hand-built themselves a home in their weekends. Now, buildings might be cyclic. Family planning, on the other hand, is quite different. There's a lot that can happen in life. And with all this to happen, and so much more, how can you be prescriptive about the type of space that you're giving? You can't have a room for every occasion, but you can provide an invitation. So in 2013, we walked up a stock track to help start a life. We simply gave them this. It was a plan for a plan. Somewhere between in and out, land and air. We chamfered the ends so we could connect back to ground. We gave them a feather. We gave them less rather than more. Now at this point, these are great buddies of mine. And James said to me, Jeremy, we've known you for a long time, but we're a family of 5. You've missed at least 2 of our children. And I said, well, no, because with all this to happen, why are we being prescriptive? We should be trying to do a house about the there and the then, not the here and the now. So, we made the first and largest space external, with a warm concrete wall to put your back on and refine centre and orientate outwards. And from there we just connect rather than divide space, so that counting becomes easy. And with less, you need less. We just simply orientate it to the north, which is where our sun comes from, and the sea breeze, which we let in the front, and we take out the back. To control, we have no mechanical plant at all. We have a super low emission wood burner against some thermal mass, and to control heat we use that wonderful invention called an eave. So we don't design the building by who's sitting at the table today, or whose shoes are in the shoe rack. So 2015, the first space comes first. The building follows on a ladder so they could store materials underneath. And as soon as the roof's on, they move in. Properly move in. And this idea of privacy, privacy is not a construct. You can live happily behind pot plants. So we design everything, and then we test and we prototype it as we go. Architecture is supposed to be an invention. We draw on this heritage and clearings to make the concrete. And for the cladding, we source a locally sustainable plywood, which we rotate and we add tips to protect the end grain so that we could feather around corners. And we could use found materials. 2018, 2020, building in your weekends takes quite a bit of time. So here's how the house works. You arrive at this first and largest space. There's many ways in. There's no front door. There's no come meet the parents. And once inside, the space just ebbs and flows from one space to the next. Here's our house raised on a ladder, controlling heat, taking air from low to high. It's all just simple stuff. So you meet the house before you arrive. There's some steps. An arrival to a place where the welcome might come from many directions. And then from there the house opens and closes, but remains connected. There's 5 internal doors and 16 external doors. 1 bathroom, split into different bits. And there's spaces for you, and spaces for many. So we can provide an invitation to how the house is being used from one day to the next. So we've done big houses and we've done small houses. We've done super expensive, we've done super cheap. We've done green stick sustainable, we've done houses dealing with climate change. This is the most important house we've done. Because it's not about size, budget, gymnastics or product. It's about less. So what's happened? Families grown up. They've found love, they've lost love, they've gone overseas, they've gone travelling, they've moved home. There's all sorts of more adventure to come. The house is a sustainable adventure. It doesn't need more than that. It's not about whose shoes are in the shoe rack. So, feather house. 2 bedrooms for a family of many. And here's Shigeru. Show it to him. Now, and look, now it's flowering. That's quite exciting. So we're trying to do buildings that have less stuff in them. This is a good book. It's aimed at teenagers. It encourages you to be an activist, conscientious activist, a friend of mine described it as. Now, in my part of the world, Tuvalu will be one of the first countries that goes completely underwater. Where I live, we've recently had, you've had floods too, I know this. We had sea surges and we've had river surges. And if you look at the city, the bit that's affected, at risk, there's not much left. So what do? Do you run? You can't run, because everywhere is important to someone. You're going to wear waders. You can't wear waders. How high do you want to make them? Well, you're going to wear sandals, or what we call jandals. Something adaptable, lightweight that you can adjust as you go. That's what I'm doing. Better yet, I'm going to wear them made out of timber. So, you all know about carbon. You know how wood embeds the carbon in it when you use it. So if you build with it, it's like a carbon bank. The same thing I talked about earlier is that small numbers add up to big numbers, mean that you don't have to do this in huge jumps. And this project, Te Wharenui o Te Ata, does something different in timber buildings. So, welcome back to Aotearoa, New Zealand. If it's coming on a boat, it really is coming on a boat. We have limited steel and limited concrete, but what we do have is a renewable source of plantation timber. We're here in Rotorua at the New Zealand Government's Timber Research Institute. They do extraordinary science, which they aim at their local community, nationally and internationally. And when we turned up, once you got past the sort of health and safety fencing, it looked like this. So the first thing we did was we flipped it to the other side of the site so we could connect to another street. And we made the building outside the fence line. So the ground floor was entirely public. Reception, display, community meeting rooms and cafe. Then we have controls on where you can go into the rest of the campus. And upstairs these 2 floors of life.
Wonderful statistics about timber buildings. It's really, really motivational. We had the fortune of recently coming to Australia and see a number of timber buildings there. And you said that you were making your timber buildings sleeker and making use of the timber much lesser than the chunk of mass timber construction that is happening. How much of percentage reduction of timber that you were able to achieve in your buildings when compared to many others? Can you say?
Yeah, it's not so much that we're using less timber, it's that the timber sizes are smaller.
Correct.
Yeah, so, and that's important because that makes everything easier.
Yes.
And so, for instance, when I was in America, they were talking about making a 20-story high timber structural building and saying it was about carbon. And I said, it's not about carbon. You could put a new front door on every house in the state, and you'll do a whole lot more carbon. You can do that tomorrow. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make buildings have finer timber so that we can we get better at reusing it.
So what all is the equipment that, when compared to normal timber, mass timber constructions, were you able to reduce the equipment because your members were sleeker?
I would answer that by saying we don't have a lot of equipment. No, seriously,
Yes.
We're not a country where you can just ring up and another it comes from somewhere else. We're a little country in the middle of nowhere, so we design to the equipment we have.
Wonderful. Building is really wonderful. Thanks. Thank you.